Naveed from SDPI, and I welcome you all on today's webinar titled Pakistan's Policy Options to Protect People from the Inflationary Pressures. And for this webinar, we are joined by Dr. Abid Suleri. He's the Executive Director, SDPI. We are joined by Dr. Aliya Hashmi Khan. She's a retired professor of economics and former Dean Faculty of Social Sciences, Quaid-i-Azam University, Islamabad. Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, he's a Joint Executive Director, SDPI. Mr. Ali Kemal, he is the Chief SDGs Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives. And Mr. Faad, he is the Senior Vice President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce Industry. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us online, but he has sent a recorded video message for us. So moving on, as we know, Pakistan has been going through the most difficult times and the quadruple crisis of the economic meltdown, political turmoil, tough IMF program implementation, and the natural disasters. This has just jeopardized millions of people's rights to an adequate standard of living. And Pakistan currently is experiencing the worst stagflation of all time, with average inflation around 26.26% for the period of July 2022 to February 2023. And we're expecting a growth rate of less than 1% for this fiscal year 2023. And in the follow-up conditions of the ongoing IMF's 9th review, the government just recently introduced a 170 billion rupees finance bill to secure the funds from the International Monetary Fund to avoid default, which led to the increase of the general sales tax from 17% to 18%, and higher taxes were imposed on the cigarettes. Many subsidies were drawn from the petroleum products and the electricity. So these much needed measures, to restore the IMF program at this critical juncture are inflationary in their very nature. And the inflationary pressures are expected to peak further, and experts believe that the headline inflation will soar to 30 to 35%. And the interest rate is also expected to rise by 200 basis points. So, owing to tight monetary policy and fiscal policies, the inflation and the unemployment is on the rise, leading to more people being, pushed under the poverty line. By all odds, this low growth and high inflation, combination is expected to continue at least for the next 18 to 24 months. And in this situation, the common man will be under the immense pressure of the daily loss in the purchasing power. So basically, this webinar aims to have the answers to what effective and implementable policy measures can be taken by the stakeholders, the federal government, the provincial governments, the private sector, to protect people from the inflationary pressures of the much needed stabilization policies of the government. We are not discussing central bank here today. We will be having a separate webinar on that, what central bank should be doing to protect the people. So we'll basically be focusing on the fiscal policies today. Again, I'll be telling you that while there are plenty of discussions, on the long-term solutions, we are most interested to know what can be done in the immediate short run, as the people need help right now and today. And based on this discussion, a summary paper will be prepared, which will be shared with the relevant stakeholders. So we request you to please be, focused towards the short-run policy options that the government take. So without any further delay, I would request Dr. Abid Suleri. Sir, we know that currently people are most affected by the high commodity prices, and the food inflation was record highest in the month of February, nearly 45%. And the government has been trying to, find solutions to this. So while you may briefly, comment on the efficiency and efficacy of the current policies of the government, we would like you to please specifically outline 3 to 5 policy measures that the government, should take to ensure food security, particularly of those the marginalized segment of the society. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Aqsa. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Aliya, and thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. And as Aqsa briefly introduced, we want to provide some sort of urgent actions that needs to be taken. We know that most of the actions that we are taking for last few weeks now, they were much delayed and much postponed policy measures that needed to be taken. But now as they are being taken to get some sort of macroeconomic stability, they do have certain negative impacts at the micro level, especially on microeconomic of masses. So while one supports the government for a consistent and continued this measure, fulfilling its commitments with the international donors, multilateral donors like IMF, they also need to take care of people at micro level. And in order to do it, some of the suggestions that I can propose, Aqsa asked me about food security, but I'd also like to add energy in it, especially petrol, because this is something I've been doing with the previous government as well. I also provided the same suggestion to Mufti Ismail Saab when he joined as a finance minister, and also to the current finance team. Now, the era of general subsidies, that is over. And we need to have a very clear strategy of targeted subsidy, be it for energy, be it for fuel, be it for food or any other basic need. So in case of petrol, we had proposed that we need to take care of two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and perhaps in the next phase, the owners of small vehicles, and by small vehicle, I mean owners of vehicle less than 800 cc. All of them, their vehicles, they are registered with the Excise and Taxation Department under certain CNIC. Based on that CNIC, their income can be found through a triangulation of data with the WISP. WISP now have National Socioeconomic Registry, which do have a certain inclusion and exclusion problem, but it is certainly one of the representative data in repository that we have now for people's well-being. So the CNICs, they can be checked with the WISP data, and we can have some certain threshold. Currently, it's around less than 30,000 rupees earning per household, those who are beneficiary of the WISP. For this few direct payment, Ministry of Poverty Alleviation and Social Safety, Ministry of Petroleum and Ministry of Finance, they can come up with any threshold, 50,000, 100,000, 75,000, whatever. And those who have only one two-wheeler or three-wheeler registered in their name on a CNIC, they should be provided some sort of direct cash grant in their bank account or through their mobile wallets. And the international market prices of fuel, that must be passed on to all consumers. I think doing it would actually be taking care of our consumers who require most protection. It would be excluding those who have large vehicles and can afford to pay the international prices of fuel if they want to drive their large vehicle. And IMF will have no objection on targeted subsidy. This was one. The second, I think in case of energy, government also need to take care of its governance. So as a consumer, and keeping in mind the grave situation of country's economy, I don't mind paying extra for my electricity bill or for my gas bill, but I also then expect the government to plug the loopholes. So if, according to Ministry of Power, if the statement that they made in the Parliamentary National Standing Committee of National Assembly, that electricity worth 380 billion rupees, it gets stolen every year. And then also the plan that from next fiscal year, the impact of the stolen electricity to the tune of rupees 520 billion rupees would be passed on to the consumer in the next financial year. I feel betrayed. It is the same thing that we have been doing for long with the gas consumer who have to pay for the unaccounted for losses of gas. So it means that government, instead of plugging the holes that it can plug through improving its governance, is passing on the burden of its inefficiencies to the consumer who are paying their bills. So as I said that while as a responsible citizen, I don't mind paying increased tariffs, but I do expect that the government would reduce its transmission and distribution losses in case of electricity and would reduce unaccounted for losses in case of gas. The third thing that I want to highlight here before I come to food security, and that is the GST. So again, one don't mind paying GST, and here I'm not arguing the quality of taxation, that GST is a regressive tax and it actually penalizes those who shouldn't pay taxes. But even if in the short term, in order to comply with its commitment to the IMF, if government have to increase GST, it should show the capacity and willingness that whatever GST we are paying, it can actually collect it. So all the eateries all over the country who are registered with the FBR POS system, the point of sale system, they don't issue you an FBR verified receipt after taking the payment, which means that the consumer, they are paying their GST very faithfully, and the owners of those restaurants, they are not passing it on to FBR, either because of FBR's connivance or because of FBR's capacity not to collect it. And again, this is something which, if can be taken care of, would, at least as a taxpayer, I'll be more than happy to pay this GST, and also the satisfaction that I'm contributing to national exchequer. So the point I'm trying to make, that current inflation, yes, we know that much of it is attributed to the policy measures which were most needed and much delayed, but also due to governance failure. Again, this is not something peculiar to this government. I'm talking and referring to all the successive governments as well. So their cumulative failure in mobilizing resources and in curtailing expenditures has led us to a point where we are today. The final thing on food security, in the short term, of course, the again targeted subsidies for food, some direct payment, continuation of some of the initiatives that the previous government it took, be it was the ration schemes or other conditional and unconditional cash transfers. And I know Dr. Aliya serves on this board. Perhaps she would be able to educate us better on it. But in the medium to long term, we need to think of import substitution of agriculture commodities. After petroleum product, our second biggest import bill is our food items. And I'm not talking of luxury food items or the packed food. I'm talking of edible oil, I'm talking of wheat, I'm talking of pulses, I'm talking of many other food commodities, especially perishables, which we have to import sometime in order to stabilize their prices in our domestic market. So we need to think of doing import substitution and taking care of earning some revenue. One of the tangible suggestions that I want to float here is thinking of bringing cultivable barren lands under cultivation in South Punjab, in Potohar, in this vast swath of land in Sindh. In desert area, we need to think of doing cattle farming or replicating something that Chinese People Liberation Army did. Their project is called the Great Green Wall of China. So they actually stopped soil erosion in the Gobi Desert by planting trees through their army. So we need to think of how we can convert that cultivable barren land into cultivated fertile lands. And in order to do it, provincial government with the consortium of private investors, with the technology that is being used by Pakistan Army, they need to bring their heads and hands together. We know, and there's a reason I'm talking of Pakistan Army here, because precision agriculture in this country cannot be carried out without involving armed forces. The drone policy, who can own drone, who can fly drone, their safety measures, their aviation, all of these things, they are the mandate of aviation authority, and its mandate of the Pakistan Air Force. Similarly, taking care of some of the infrastructure needs can be done by Army's electrical and mechanical engineering corps. So we require them to bring their focus on these barren lands, and that would be something which would actually help many of our institutions to then focus on food security and compensate for the very often criticism that they have to bear, that they are only interested in housing societies. So I think it's the agriculture and it's the food security of the country that our institution, they need to think about, and they need to bring and mobilize their technology for ensuring food security and taking care of food inflation. Sorry, I went slightly longish, but I thought to give my some practical and tangible solutions, some low-hanging fruits, and certain medium to long-term measures to contain this inflation, because this inflation is stubborn and it would stay with us for a couple of years, and we need to get prepared for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I guess you have very rightly mentioned that we need energy governance, so that the inefficiencies of the government are not transferred to the consumers. And secondly, the GST we have imposed, we have increased the percentage, but we need to ensure that the taxes are actually collected, and obviously food security and agriculture. With that, I would like to have Dr. Aliya Hashmi Khan. Again, Dr. Abid, just as mentioned about the targeted subsidies, what 2 to 3 policy measures do you propose that the government should take, especially in terms of the targeted subsidies, to protect people from the inflationary pressures? And along with that, we would also like to listen to your thoughts from a labor market perspective. The unemployment is on the rise. So what sectors, particularly regarding the economy and labor market, do you think the government must focus on to increase the employment opportunities? And what exactly needs to be done in this regard in the short run, with a span of 1 to 2 years? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Aqsa, and thank you, SDPI, Dr. Vaqar, Dr. Abid, for inviting me to share my views on this very important issue. And as Dr. Abid has very comprehensively outlined, that this is the time to expand the net of target subsidies. But let me just point out a few issues in terms of targeting of subsidies. Pakistan has had a good experience in devising targeting mechanisms using the National Socio-Economic Registry, and especially it began targeting during the times of COVID, and the SARS cash relief program that was implemented was a big success in providing targeted relief. And in the same vein, the SARS Ration Riayat program was started, and it saddens me to think that it could not continue in the way that it should have continued. And probably if we had had policy continuity in our social protection arena, we would not be at such a thoughtful moment as to how to reinvigorate the targeted subsidies if they were already in a continuous implementation mode. However, I think the biggest challenge is how to expand the net of a food subsidy program for targeted subsidies like the Asas Ration Riayat was beyond the already targeted BIS beneficiaries. And I take up on Dr. Abid's point that there is a lot of data in the NSCR which is yet unexplored in terms of identifying new beneficiaries through their employment status. For example, we were also on the way towards building a registry of informal economy workers when the initiative got stalled. Whatever I'm trying to say is that social protection, especially during COVID and post-COVID, is really the most important way in which to protect segments, marginalized and vulnerable segments of the population. So coming back to targeted relief, I think the whole public sector development program also needs to be reprioritized to make fiscal space for even greater allocation towards different targeted social protection measures than just the BIS program, and which includes food security, obviously, because it has intergenerational impacts in terms of malnutrition, and that has to be factored in. And I also support the petrol card measure that, for targeting fuel and petrol subsidies to the needy segments of the society. But then the whole issue is, how do we use and triangulate the data that is available to identify the beneficiaries? And that has to be done in a very coordinated manner. Several ministries have to be involved, but it has to be done fast, because this is a global phenomena. And if I may refer to the Global Economic Prospects report of the World Bank, which was launched during the joint meetings of the World Bank and IMF, which really pointed out that South Asia has already the largest number of poor, region-wise, beyond certain parts of Africa. So the issue of, stagflation is going to hit the South Asian region harder than other regions. And I will try to twin that with my thoughts about how to counter the unemployment that is already on the rise. I think some very revolutionary measure like the employment guarantee program needs to be considered, because what we have to do is to protect people from the rising inflation, which not only through monetary measures, but through many different measures. Obviously, we've talked about the fiscal measure, then there's the labor market measures, which are really going to be or should be focused on providing immediate relief. And the famous NREGA program of India is an important one, after which the rural employment guarantee initiatives can be developed. But we also need urban employment guarantee schemes, and because we have huge informal economy workers who are suffering because of increasing inflation, because their wages are not, tied to the minimum wage law in Pakistan. And many of them work in small and medium enterprises, what we call the MSME sector, which also has to be given some kind of protection so that it keeps generating employment for a huge and populous country like Pakistan. So I think it is also important to think of how, I know we are not discussing the central bank, but like the relief that the central bank provided to the MSME sector during COVID, I think a similar kind of relief package needs to be devised to protect jobs and livelihoods and to help people counter food and fuel inflation, through their status of employment in the small and medium enterprise sector. So I will stop here, and we can pick up on these issues in more detail later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aliya. And I guess you very rightly mentioned that we do require an employment guarantee program, and much appreciation for the package of the central bank to protect the jobs and the livelihoods of the MSME sector. With that, I'd like to move to Dr. Vaqar. Sir, you know that we are going through this IMF program, and IMF has a very strong focus on the revenue maximization. And recently there was a finance bill has come as well, and which has put a burden on the common man. So keeping in mind the current high fiscal deficit, what fiscal policy measures, both in terms of the revenue generation and the prioritization of the government spending, must be taken by the stakeholders to ensure the protection of the people from the inflationary pressures? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aqsa. I may have some connectivity issues, so in case I can't be heard, I can then switch off my screen. Let me, if you allow me, I'll only focus on the taxation aspects, given that the spending side has been very comprehensively covered by Dr. Aliya and Dr. Abid Suleri. So let me just probably focus, and I'm sure that Kemal will also be focusing on the spending side as well as, of course, the impact that this inflation is having on the development objectives. So in terms of how the taxation structure is impacting the current inflation or the crisis of prices, which of course the country is passing through, one needs to recognize the three channels through which taxes impact inflation. One, of course, is the government revenues. And of course, while you need decent government revenues so that budget deficit can be reduced, and over time government borrows less, which means that money supply is stable, which in turn also means that a stable money supply won't be leading to higher inflation. And any ballooning of that money supply would contribute to inflation. The second channel is, of course, domestic production. The fact that taxes do impact production incentives, the way production takes place, that, of course, is a big question mark and impacts the efficiency with which agriculture and manufacturing items reach our markets. And taxes have a wide role to play in creating that incentive structure in agriculture, manufacturing, or services sector. And the third channel through which inflation could impact, through which taxes could impact inflation, is the trade channel. The fact that, of course, there are customs duties, there are both tariffs as well as GST on import stage, which end up affecting or influencing the price at which goods are being imported. So these three channels, government revenues, domestic production, and trade, these get impacted by tax policy, and in turn would have an impact on inflation as well. Now, in the short term, while of course a lot has been said, again, I'll limit myself to the incidence of taxes. Of course, there's no doubt that in the forthcoming budget, one would like to see a lower burden, or at least some marginally lower burden of the indirect taxes, withholding taxes. It's not possible at this stage, of course, given the expectations from the fund as well. But what is possible is a better packaging of at least 3 or 4 dozen withholding taxes. We have managed to merge many of them, bring them down from 76 to around 45, but further work needs to be done in the neighborhood. The number of withholding taxes is much lower. So there is a case for more simplistic taxation structure, even in case of withholding or indirect taxes. Then, of course, a lot needs to be done on when it comes to reducing compliance cost faced by the taxpayers. There is a very comprehensive report by the Federal Tax Ombudsman, which needs to be looked into. They have given very strong proposals on how to reduce these compliance costs. There's a National Tax Harmonization Council as well, National Tax Council as well, which was tasked to focus on tax harmonization, focusing on areas where double and multiple taxation takes place. That tax council hasn't been meeting very regularly. And one just hopes that in the days run up to the budget, the National Tax Council, which includes all the provincial revenue authorities as well, they will be participating to make the GST a much more harmonized structure, which in turn can help bring down prices as well. While, of course, there is a case of keeping food trade or food imports protected through lower tariffs or lower GST on import trade. But again, this is easier said than done. As I said, that we are under a fund program and we have to respect, of course, those negotiations as well. Next, of course, we can focus on some medium-term recommendations for tax policy. In the medium term, of course, a tax policy that helps promote regional trade can greatly lower the prices. Just last week, we saw this report that onion was 1/3 the price across the border, but just because on our eastern side we have stopped trading, we could not import onions, and you saw the unprecedented prices. While many said that it was due to floods, but the case in point is pre-2017 prices in agriculture and food, which were much more stable because seasonality was factored in through regional trade. So with correct tariff reform, there's a huge case that opening up of regional trade could stabilize food prices. Next, in the medium term, one could also look at curbing the informal economy. A lot of informal economy is really not something which is essential items. A lot of it is items which are simply coming in and they end up competing with those who are genuinely doing business in this country. So tax policy needs to correct the incentives in the informal sector as well. And then, of course, taxes need to help non-debt creating flows in the medium term. Currently, of course, there is a huge challenge for attracting non-debt flows. We end up relying on diplomacy, on, of course, brotherhood with China, but we really forget that it is the problems in the tax structure that many a times prevent the non-debt inflows which the country is in need of, is in dire need of. Moving on from the medium term, of course, in the longer term, both tax and tariff policy that promotes agriculture and manufacturing productivity needs to be respected, and it shouldn't be in a stop-go cycle. You have a national tariff policy, let's give it some time. You can change it after 3 years, you could review it after 3 years, but don't change the producer incentives so frequently that it makes it increases their difficulty to lock themselves in longer term investment decisions. The fact that we gave SDPF, Strategic Trade Policy Framework, we gave national tariff policy, but then we walk away from it, is a huge concern for those who want to invest in agricultural productivity, which over time will bring down agricultural prices as well. Also, for the longer term, there is a role for provinces. And there are some large tax bases, including taxes on agriculture, taxes on property, taxes on transport, which are under the provincial administration. And it is these taxes or the reform of these taxes which is in the provincial realm. One needs to realize that the way provinces impose these taxes in turn add up into the cost of final consumer, the prices of final consumer. So the way, for example, we will be taxing our transportation sector, our distribution sector, storage sector at a provincial level, plus the services associated with this, given that GST on services is a provincial subject, it'll eventually end up hitting the final consumer. So the provinces also need to realize that their revenue authorities need to understand their role in the price hike. Then, if I may also say, in the longer term, one has to look into some very comprehensive reports provided by the Competition Commission of Pakistan. Competition law in itself is a guiding principle which in the longer term keeps a check on consumer interest and inflation. They have issued report for cement, for various FMCGs, which needs to be looked into how cartel ends up, of course, fleecing the end consumer and keeps inflation level higher. Something related to this is also the role of procurement. Given that government is one of the highest procuring body, procurement of goods and services, the procurement reform literature tells us, scientific evidence tells us, also leads to lowering of inflation, something which we should be carefully looking at. My final point is about tax cascading. So whether it is FBR, NTC, or the Provincial Revenue Authority, we need to realize that there is a lot of distortion being created by tax cascading, which simply means that in any tax or any levy which hits the same good or services several times throughout its production structure is resulting into higher prices. We are seeing this in oil and gas sector. We are seeing this in electricity. We are seeing this in so many other consumer goods and food items as well. And this continues to not just hit the consumer, but also distort the production incentives as well, to end up producing less and less efficient goods just because those goods either are better in evading or avoiding taxation, or probably the incidence of tax is lower on them. So I'll give it back to you, Aqsa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. As you have mentioned that we do need a very simplistic taxation structure, and in the medium term, we need to look towards the tariff reforms that definitely help promote the regional trade, which might help us in stabilizing the food prices. And secondly, we need to control the informal economy of the essential items. There has to be a proper tax policy to correct incentives in the formal sector, and again the role of procurement of the goods and services that might also help in lowering the inflation. With that, I'd like to move to Mr. Ali Kemal. Sir, I would like you to tell us about, we know that the inflation is of the supply side nature, and keeping in mind the present crisis, what could be the specific supply side policies to, curb this inflation, particularly food inflation? And if you could please focus on the role of the provincial governments, particularly to play in this scenario to control the food inflation and ensure that the least burden is put on the marginalized segment of the society. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aqsa, and Assalamu alaikum to everyone, Aliya, Dr. Vaqar, Dr. Abid, Suleri, and everyone here. I think Dr. Sajid is invited me for this session, and he asked me at least. Anyways, I heard Dr. Abid, and he was very happy to pay the higher price of electricity and GST, and I think he's the only one who is happy in paying the higher prices in Pakistan. Good one, sir. government needs to fix the problem, and we are all saying this for the many years. And I don't know whether government is not listening, or government is not doing it, or government does not have the will to do that. I think as a government servant, I'm saying this, that we need to, at the planning commission even, we need to sit together and we need to chalk out action plan, that how do we control the circular debt, how do we control the governance failures, how do we control the other procurement type of expenditure which Dr. Vaqar is mentioning. So I think
So we cannot hear you.
Aliya, आप म्यूट हो गए शायद.
need to sit together, that these are the policy options, these are the actions point, because the bureaucracy works with the action points. That's what I learned for the last 2 years, because we always say that, okay sir, reforms kar lete hain. Sir, what reforms? So these are the problems, and we are having problem in the data release of certain indicators. Anyways, back to the point. As far as the supply side is concerned, I was thinking on the supply side when Dr. Vaqar is talking. The supply side raises inflation, which we all know in our case, Pakistan. We see IMF is saying no subsidies to hire, but the poor's, and then they asked exchange rate to depreciate. Exchange rate appreciated around 9 to 10 rupees in the last 1 month or three weeks. And yesterday they said that IMF is not happy, and today we had 19 rupees depreciation in exchange rate. So now I think IMF will be happy. And there's a 16% pass through in the in the medium run, which is around 6 months to 12 months. That's a fact. I did my paper, Mohsen Said Khan, Dr. Tazaz, and there's a certain paper based on the purchasing power parity models, which says that there's a pass-through effect of 16% of depreciation to the inflation, and that's what we are looking at when exchange rate has moved from 160 to 283 today. So let's hope for the best, but that's a supply side shock, and then there is a value chain effect. So supply side, basically coming to the point, supply side raises inflation and decreases the domestic demand as well. So after that, if we are keep on decreasing the demand by demand-led policies, by increasing the cost of borrowing, that seems absurd policy. And on the other hand, if we are reducing the interest rate, it may raise inflation, but may increase output and reduction in unemployment. That will help in coping the inflation. So even we are sitting in the province, even we are sitting at the federal level, inflation is a overall phenomena. We can't say that it is happening at the federal level and it is not happening at the Punjab level. So whatever the money supply is, whatever the state bank is doing, it is affecting all the provinces. As Dr. Vaqar has already mentioned, but adding to one point to what he said, it's an era of information, and he already mentioned that onion price is 1/3. I read that they have surplus, huge surplus, and when they have surplus, it will reduce the cost, the price. I think by the comparison between India and Pakistan is 1/5, and we could have imported onions from India, but due to trade restrictions and other, in that case, informal economy helps. Informal trade help, but that's called smuggling. But there are other channels through which we can import onions and other products into Pakistan. That's happening here as well. The issue is that we do not have a good information system, and we are not using the information system correctly. I remember when there's a last increase in tomato prices. So Rajanpur has surplus tomatoes, and the neighboring district has the less supply of tomatoes, and we do not have a better information system which says that we can increase the supply of certain perishable items from one area to another area. So one thing is very sure, and that's what we are talking to Punjab government for the last 3 years. 3 years that you have a PITB, so you should have a very good AI system, that is a artificial intelligence information system, which gives you continuous real-time data that what province or what district or what tehsil has what a perishable item in surplus or in demand, so that you can move from one product to the other district. Though there are some items on the ban list from one district to the other district, but still they can do that. Bottom line is that even if there is a regulation sector or there is an informal sector, if the information system is good, we have lesser governance failure, and when we have lesser governance failures, we will have lesser increase in prices. I am not saying that inflation will not rise to 31.1%. Inflation may have risen to 25%, not 31%. But AI system and the governance system, if we have good system in place, the inflation or the increase in prices was not that much. But these increases in prices in the food prices is the hysteresis effect which we are having it, and it will continue for the next 6 months to 8 months. Some people said 2 years, but 6 months to 8 months, we need to be very careful. The inflation may increase to 35% or 36%. It will come down definitely, but at the current scenario, when the rupee is depreciating and we do not have the information system set in, and people are earning. Some people, we always say that some people are earning from this. So those people who are earning, who are the rent seekers, they will continue to earn in this current governance system, and that needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, if you could please just answer this question that how are we supposed to implement policies regarding the artificial inflation, the hoarding and profiteering? How what can the provincial governments do in that aspect? If you could highlight, please.
I was talking to, this is $1 million question, and I don't have the correct answer, but let me tell you what I have discussed with the DCs and the ACs and the artificial intelligence guys. We were making a system of AI of some other products, and certain DCs, which are my friends basically, we were sitting together, and they said that we have the better information at the DC level and the AT level, and if we have the AI system installed over there, and we can connect that AI system across districts, which is controlled by the Deputy Commissioner. They have all the information in the morning, whether in the afternoon, while sitting at home, relaxing. So they can build they can call, or they can make the policies, or they can, not the policies, they can make it change. They can just interfere in other markets, so they will ask other DCs to send these products to other districts. In that way, it will be helpful, but it has to have a system placed at the district level or at the AC level, who will talk to or to coordinate with other ACs or the DCs. So basically, it's a coordination failure right now which is going on. That needs to be corrected. And that can be connected through the AI or an artificial intelligence information system. That needs to be built. We have to ask the computer experts that how do we build that system which has all the data in it. And ACs and DCs has all the information in their offices available 24/7.
Thank you so much, sir. We have heard the government side, the government policies, and now we'll be focusing on the private sector. Unfortunately, Mr. Faad couldn't join us in person, but he has sent a recorded message. Hamza, if you could please play it. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you SDPI for running such a beautiful webinar today. Dr. Vaqar Saab, thank you very much. It's indeed a great pleasure today to be at this forum, and it's very important that we keep discussing and we keep highlighting these issues for the governments and for the people of our economy to understand this better. Of course, inflation is something, that hits all of us, and it is, and it has. In the past 1 year, the supply side of it has immensely been affected. The rates have been immensely affected. There's tons of things that we could do. There's tons of strategic areas that we should have done, but we haven't. So today, the private sector has taken the fall of it, and we've become a punching bag from both the angles. We cannot stop business, of course, and we have to keep importing, because Pakistan in the due course of the last 30 years has become import dependent. We have not import substituted. Similarly, whereas different countries in the same region have become very, self-sufficient. And we all understand, the economic war that we face in this region. We're the highest and we're the costly country, and we want to export. There was a time when Pakistan was leading its exports, and today we are still, looking at that part. But unfortunately, we haven't really, looked upon on the product development. If we don't develop our products, we won't be able to, export. We can only, say so much about it. Similarly, when our politicians, unfortunately, they don't have a proper policy. And for the same reason, the business and since I represent Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry as the Senior Vice President, I would boldly say that the government of Pakistan has not really put their focus right. They have not really put their long-term policies right. If the business of any country has a simple policy, or they have a simple direction to follow, that I'm not going to be surprised by a new tax regime, I'm not going to be surprised by some electricity tariffs, or I'm not going to be surprised by some infrastructure issues. That is something a business as general faces. And if we see and we assess our last year, we have faced problems like inflation. And inflation is something that's present in all economies, but it's literally controlled in a sense. All the businesses, all the stakeholders are on board when inflation keeps rising. And the forex plays a very important role, especially in Pakistan, because we've become we're not independent in this supply chain. We are almost 85% dependent on imports. All the raw materials that we consume are imported. So definitely that's a big issue we're facing at this point. The IMF hovering over Pakistan, and the political pressures that are being created. It's not a very welcoming situation, but mind you, the private sector in this very hard time and very unstable time has become a punching bag for the government and the consumer itself. It's very funny that a business that's been around for 40 years or 50 years today is facing, and it's on the brink of close. But in the same hard times, businesses of Pakistan have taken the lead, and they're not laying off anyone. We've seen a lot of unemployment in the past 2 years, but businesses are trying to keep their fair share of balancing it out. And I have seen, and I have been committed from the business community that they're not going to lay off anyone just because their LCs are not going through, just because the electricity tariffs have gone through. But similarly, it's important that income levels have also to be rise like this. If the income is not increased, if they've not properly gauged the inflation with the supply side effects, it's going to be really hard for a common man to live about. So in these situations, if we totally rely on the private sector, that's not the fair part of it, because we are almost handling the entire economy. We generate the taxes, we generate all kinds of income that the government holds and the government spends. And we would much appreciate if the government, takes us on board when making such kind of decisions. Because, if a businessman can take money out of any consumer's pocket, we definitely know how to make, a better contribution to, and we know how to create harmony. So that's the best part a government can do. If they take us on board in making policies, especially, when the budget is on the brink. And I think if they take us on board today, if they take the business community on board today, there's going to be a lot of things that they won't have to, fix after. So that is something I would, on this platform, also request to the government, that since we all are today discussing here all the problems of our economic issues, I think it's very important and it's high time that, stakeholders are taken on board. So it's easier for them to make decisions. It's easier for us to discuss these decisions. And when we have the courage, we have the confidence of our governments, definitely we can make a better change. We can bring it to a better part. But again, let's come back to the topic of how do we protect people? In the first place, the kind of increase we have seen in the dollar in the past 1 year, businesses have not really, transferred that cost to the consumer as it should have been, if, stagnant. Today, if we see the dollar impact, since I myself am a palm oil exporter, importer, manufacturer, I can tell you, the kind of taxes we have and the issues we are facing in LCs, we have not really pushed it through. We have not really forwarded all those costs to the consumer. And if we do, it's going to be a chaos, because nobody is going to be able to buy those products. So in this very hard time, the business community, as again, I'm going to give you a little overview of Pakistan again. Pakistan is one of those countries, the highest donating countries in the world. And we are termed as, when we're looking for IMF for funds. But you know what? In the same context, we're still living in the same situation as we were 2 years ago. And we've minimized our profits. We've minimized all the expenses that we were transferring to the consumer because, the income power is not there. The spending power is not there. And if it's not there, that is the prime indicator of economy that, if a business does not understand this, it's going to become stagnant. It's not going to go forward. And today that I see, the consumer is not really buying the entire stock of a month. The consumer is actually gone to a weekly basis of purchasing of groceries in the special place. When you talk about groceries, this is the main artery of any economy. The food items, those have become out of reach. And today all businesses have pitched in, and I can say this with confidence that especially Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry was the only chamber raising its voices in the right forums to make sure the prices don't go up. And it's appreciable to the government as well at this point, especially the administration of Islamabad, that they have made it possible. But then again, it's very short-lived, I would say, and I would term it as that, because if it's short-lived, the kind of surprises we're getting every 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, it's, we're getting electricity tariffs again and again, we're getting gas tariffs again and again. We need to really look out at the regional trade at this point, especially the Central Asian countries, because they're very rich in energy. And Pakistan does not have that energy edge over everyone. And if, believe you me, is simple. Pakistan has been exporting textiles to the entire world and we're known for it. But now we're not known for it because we and our government have changed their shifts. We have brought this shift in the Pakistani area that, we were an agriculture country. And I think the basics, we need to go back to the basics. And that's where we, specialize at. So we have to come back to the agriculture part, and we have to stop this industrialization. Because the industrialization that we are into is all import dependent. We have to import substitute. We have to start learning to import substitute. Similarly, I would talk about stable policies. we really need to have a charter of economy between all the political parties, because that is something that is, creating uncertainty. It's destabilizing our whole economic situation, because the word that goes out of Pakistan is not very pleasant, and we need to work on building our image better. We need to work today. We need to get together. This forum, I would request all of you today, since we're together in this, and we have to together make it better for Pakistan, because अगर पाकिस्तान है तो हम हैं, हम पाकिस्तान नहीं है तो हम कुछ भी नहीं है. तो इसके साथ बड़ा ज़रूरी है कि हम प्राइवेट सेक्टर तो अपना रोल अदा कर रहा है, and we have been doing it for the longest time, and I think we are the only people, we are the only sector, we are the only stakeholders that have always taken the fall, because we always get pressurized from Competition Commission, we get notices from FBR claiming, that we are charging exorbitant prices. But you know what? It's all because of the inflation. If we even calculate the prices, like for instance, pharmaceutical companies in the past 1 year has really, taken up losses, because I remember Panadol went out of market because, they couldn't make those products in that government-led, government-perfected prices. But that's not the case. We really need to sit down with our government. We need government-perfected prices. But that's not the case. We really need to sit down with our government. Our government really needs to sit with us and discuss these possibilities, that how we can make it better. Of course, if there's a policy for the businessman, that there's a 5-year policy. Again, Charter of Economy is the main topic. Then, if there's a 5-year policy, we would know how to attract foreign direct investments. We would know how our business is going to perform for the next 5 years. I wouldn't say make it zero rated, but at least there should be some kind of indication of the near future for us, that we're not going to get a surprise. Every 15 days the costs are changing, the inflation is changing, and it's risen to almost, I think, 33%, as some of the studies suggest. And again, taxes are being imposed on different industries, and that's something we really need to take care of. The private sector, with confidence, I'm telling you, is playing its full part, and it's going to keep playing its full part to make Pakistan a better place and a better area for investments for the entire area, and especially the regional trade. Now the Central Asian countries are looking towards us, and we have become a gateway for them. And I would encourage all of them to come to Pakistan, and let's partner it up. Together we can, together we will make Pakistan a better place to live, to thrive, and make business. Thank you very much.
Yes, we've heard Mr. Faad's review on the private sector perspective. Before moving on to the question answer session, Dr. Aliya, Hashmi, if I may come to you, if you have any point regarding what Mr. Faad has said, I'd like you to just give some very specific, thoughts on the conclusion. While we're moving towards the conclusion, we'll request you to give your some very pressing thoughts. Final 2 to 3 minutes you have. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Aqsa. I'll just reiterate that listening carefully to what everyone has spoken about, I think it's the supply side that is being highlighted. The supply side can really help Pakistan get out of this stagflation problem, which is, inflation coupled with low growth and high unemployment, because the monetary measures are going to go just as far as they can go, but to really shield the people from the impacts of high inflation, we need to reinvigorate our supply side. And Dr. Abid talked about, increasing the coverage of agriculture through bringing uncultivable land under cultivation. Then the private sector representative also talked about dynamizing manufacturing. Ali Kemal talked about better supply management through harnessing better supply management of food stocks through better, through harnessing artificial intelligence. So does the international reports and literature also are pointing towards, more focus on supply side. And the measures that I talked about regarding, employment generation and employment promotion, those are also very important, since Pakistan has a huge youth population, and we must create jobs, and we must create decent jobs, in all possible sectors. And now the green jobs are also very much under discussion. So we have to explore how to generate green jobs for our youth, and to raise the earning power of families and individuals to counter these inflationary trends, because targeted subsidies will also go, so far as the fiscal space allows, and how we can use the existing databases to provide targeted relief. So we have to work on multiple fronts in order to combat these what is being called the toxic combination of inflation and low growth, which is actually a global phenomena, and we should be thankful that we are not really facing the fallout from the Ukraine war, which Europe is. So countries are also grappling with shortages that are being perpetuated through the Ukraine war. And, we should count our blessings that we are not one of the major affectees of the Ukraine war fallouts. And, we have the domestic productive resources to focus upon. And of course, I will not underestimate better efficiency of public expenditures, better governance, and control of leakages and, wastages, which have been alluded to by the different speakers. So I think all in all, we need to get our economic management and our economic policy house in order. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable interventions. With that, I'll request Mr. Ali Kemal for your final thoughts. And before that, we have a question for you. Like SPP is raising the interest rate, rupee has depreciated all-time low, inflation is all-time high, purchasing power is declining. However, incomes are not increasing. My question is from Mr. Ali Kemal, how to stabilize the purchasing power to sustain in these tough times? What are those firm level relevant policies, or how to implement them? This is an audience question, sir, for you. Over to you, sir.
I have read the questions and I thought that I should disconnect. But the thing is that we have already, or everyone I think said that it's a supply side shock. We have higher prices, we have higher unemployment, we have lower output. Now, in that case, of course, the purchasing power of the people have gone down, and people who are unemployed, they are not getting anything. So BISP is one way, which is IMF is also projecting that we should give them targeted subsidies. And as Dr. Aliya mentioned, that targeted subsidies is not the only way. We have to come up with several incentives or several interventions, and it's a whole package. So number two is that we know, and one of our colleagues from Quaid-i-Azam and Faad, he reported a year ago that this inflation is not going to come down for the next 1.5 years, and everyone was laughing at him. And I was talking to him. I said, "Yeah, you are absolutely right. Maybe we can, if we can start working now, we will have a lower trajectory started in the next 9 to 12 months." And after his talk on one of the webinars, it's been 15 months. And now people are talking about next 2 years. So when we know that the inflation is not going to come down for the next 2 years, let's train people. Let's give them a specific training and create the opportunities for them in terms of entrepreneurship or the employment categories, so that they can cope with the problem of inflation. Otherwise, inflation is not going to be not going to come down for the next 6 to 8 months. That's my hunch, and that's a optimistic hunch. Because if we are saying 2 years, then people might say, "Yaar, ye pagal ho raha hai, 6 months mein niche aa jayega," nahi aayega. But the thing is that we need to create opportunities. Number one, create opportunities by giving them training as well as giving them some kind of loans. But if we give them high loans like in millions, then that will create inflation. Definitely. If we're giving them inflation, if we're giving them a smaller amount of loans, which will that will create also inflation, but at a lower level, at a smaller percentage. But in that case, we will have more employment, and those people will be doing their own businesses. And in that way, they can cope with their inflation problems, and their purchasing power. Their purchasing power will be at par. If not at par, then at least at some point, which is better than we have currently. But it can only happen in the next 6 to 12 months if we start it today. I don't know whether they are starting it. It's my own. As a researcher, as a reader opinion, it's not a government opinion. So that's how we can control that.
Thank you so much, sir. Before I request Dr. Abid for his final thoughts and concluding remarks, we have one more question from the audience. Any of you can answer this question. How do you think the interprovincial coordination mechanisms can be improved amid growing political polarization, and how much share of the inflationary pressures can be simply categorized to lack of administrative efforts? Dr. Aliya, Mr. Ali Kemal, Dr. Abid, any of you can answer this question.
Thank you. The magnitude that how much of it of inflation can be attributed to our weaknesses in governance, that perhaps I'm not aware of any particular study that can give me the precise answer to this question. But of course, wherever we are today, a significant reason of it is our weaknesses, the governance weaknesses, the loopholes, and also the big holes in our economic infrastructure, the institutional as well as the policy infrastructure. So they keep on saying that if you have a vessel without bottom, you can pour as much water in it, it won't stay there. And this is exactly the metaphor that applies to our economy. Now, when we talk of interprovincial coordination, and I think Ali Kemal gave the example of use of artificial intelligence, SDPI, we had actually helped the government by providing them a platform, food security portal, the food security dashboard. We got it developed, we provided it to Ministry of Food Security and Research, and that dashboard was providing real-time data of prices of supply and of demand of essential commodities, including wheat and wheat flour, but also some of the perishable commodities. Unfortunately, with the change of government, that dashboard was also got discontinued, and ministry stopped using it. Otherwise, it could have been an excellent tool today. And through this webinar, I'd again request Ministry of National Food Security and Research and the current government to have a look at this. It had the potential of actually creating interprovincial coordination to control inflation. Now, all the 5 panelists, including the private sector one, there was one consensus, and that was stagflation is here to stay for some more time. This stagflation, we need to have some urgent firefighting measures, the low-hanging fruits that we can take through some policy measures, especially strengthening social safety nets. But in the medium to long term, we need to bring some both policy as well as some institutional reforms. Our lenders, the multiple, these multilateral lenders as well as bilateral creditors, they can give us money, but they cannot do reforms for us. And it is reform which is needed in this country. Pakistan never felt this kind of situation because we had been getting benefit of our geostrategic and geographical location, the war on terror and war against Soviet Union in Afghanistan, that had been providing us with an uninterrupted flow of dollars. But this time, we need to learn from this crisis. It had to be our defining moment. We need to think of how to ensure food security. We need to think of how to protect the social safety net and the vulnerable. And we need to strengthen our revenue mobilization efforts, not only efficient tax collection, but also efficient spending. And we need to actually respond both as a whole of government as well as a whole of society and nation to this impending crisis, which has started affecting our day-to-day lives now. Thank you very much, colleagues, for organizing it, and we look forward to the more feedback and the policy suggestion from honorable panelists so that we can compile it and we can release it. Thank you. Over to you, Aqsa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I'll once again thank all of the panelists for joining us for today's session. Thank you so much for your valuable interventions. We'll definitely be preparing a summary paper out of these policy measures that you have suggested, and we'll be sharing with the relevant stakeholders. I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us. So thank you so much, everyone. Allah Hafiz.